It's the Wex Appeal Podcast. Barbells, beats, and buffoonery.
3, 2, 1, go! Here we go.
Dope conversations.
Damn, that's my Genghis Khan.
Where fitness, pop culture, and a lot of random buffoonery collide.
I'm coming for you.
It's ridiculous, really.
Hashtag Space War.
But amusing.
Wex, you laughed least at me, so you get to go next.
Here's your host, Wex.
I was going to say I blacked out during the explanation. I just heard Spaceball.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to a beautiful sunny morning, and I say that with absolutely no sarcasm today, as I did yesterday. Welcome to TYR Wodapalooza 2025, right here on the Experience stage, and I am here. We have the PFAA panel, but we have more than just the PFAA. I want to go from my left to right. To my left, I have Ed Blanch, and he is the president of the AFJ, which is the Association of Fitness Judges. To his left, you may know him, Brent Fikowski, the most recent retiree in CrossFit, and but he is the president of the PFAA. And then to his left, Josh Hicks is the PFAA safety advisor, and you are also the director of safety for TYR Wodapalooza here currently. So, ladies and gentlemen, welcome them to the panel here. And I wanted to just kind of start off with kind of defining the roles of what we have. So we talked about the AFJ, talked about PFAA and safety. So we kind of, Brent, I'll let you start with the PFAA and just define kind of the the 1,000-foot view of what the PFAA is, and then we'll kind of get into the nuts and bolts of it.
Yeah, great. Thanks so much for the intro, Lex. The PFAA, like the name sort of insinuates, Professional Fitness Athletes Association. So the idea there is athlete advocacy, right? And what do the athletes need? How can we best serve those athletes to create a better experience for them? And in every sport that looks a little bit different. And in our sport, it's interesting because, you know, we're representing the best athletes in the sport, and we're trying to improve essentially their working conditions, right? And in some cases that might be paid. And I think with the word professional, really, this is something we just spoke about earlier. To me, there's two parts to that, right? One of those is monetary, it's about money, but the other part with professional is organization. And just, you know, if you're acting professionally, you are speaking in full sentences, or you are well organized. And so an athlete association looks out for the interests of the athletes. And, you know, the events have to look out for their interests, judges have to look out for their interests, and I think in a sport, especially in an individual sport, can be very easy for athletes as singular, you know, entities, or even, you know, a coach who looks after a few athletes to look out for those. But if someone's not looking out for the interests of the entirety of the athletes, you know, bad things can happen. Like, you know, they can be taken advantage of. And I'm not saying that's necessarily happening in this sport, but, you know, if you look through the history of these other sports, the athlete associations can make a lot of positive change when, as a whole, they're pushing in the same direction, understand where they are collectively, and, you know, move together to make positive change.
And I think that makes a global thing, because a lot of times when things are going good in the sport for the top athletes, maybe the people that have problems with it are underneath them, but want it to be more of a fair playing field, so it kind of makes it fair for everybody. So everybody gets a voice from the athlete's perspective.
Yeah, I would hope so. I think, you know, we wanted to be very clear about who we represent, which is about the top 60 men and 60 women in the world. And that's not because we don't care about the 61st person in the world, but we just have to create a line. And so, you know, something like football, like NFL, it's very obvious who the NFL Players Association represents, because if you are on a contract, the NFL Players Association represents you because you're on a team and you're being paid. So whereas in this sport, it changes, right? And so we're doing our best to have very objective criteria, but that doesn't mean if you're the 61st person that you can't reach out if you have a problem. And certainly some of the things we tried to do to improve, you know, Wodapalooza and create a partnership with them have far-reaching effects to people who, officially speaking, are not eligible members as part of the association.
Absolutely. Ed, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Yeah, thank you. It's great being here. Thanks for having us. So with the AFJ, we are the Association of Fitness Judges. We're representing over 200 judges from around the world, and we have sort of three main focuses in our organization. So one is the directory. So we're cataloging our judges, where they are, what their experience is, any feedback, thoughts, making sure we can get the best judges to the best competitions. The second part is education. A lot of judges, they come to their first big competition and it's here you go. There's not a lot of introductory sort of sessions. There's no standard operating procedures. So we're working on a number of education components. So online videos with YouTube. We just ran our very first in-person seminar on Wednesday, and we're actually doing an evaluation over those judges over this competition weekend. So they're getting evaluated over 4 days of competition rather than just at the end of it a yes or no. And the third part is working with competitions. So competitions will reach out to us saying we have a lot of elite athletes coming, a lot of prize money. We need to make sure that prize money goes to the right people. So we'll then have that conversation with them about how many judges they'll need, head judges, team leads, things like that, and then we work with them on what that looks like. So most competitions now that we work with are covering the accommodation for other volunteers, as well as a lot of travel stipends as well, because all the judges here and a lot of the competitions are volunteers. They are paying their own way to get here. They're taking time away from work, taking time away from their families to volunteer for these positions. And as the sport grows, more prize money, more exposure, there's going to have to be that next step with the judging, with the standards, things like that.
Absolutely. And we'll turn it over to Josh.
You just call me Hicks.
Hicks. Let's go.
Everybody in the space knows this, and I appreciate the I'm terrible with these. Yeah, I appreciate the introduction. So safety, I've kind of been around this for a while, and safety's kind of adapted, and we could probably call it an advancement of a pretty great degree from 13 years ago. And one of the things that we wanted to do, the crews that I've worked with, is that we wanted to create a standard that we could carry with us. We frequently say that we can help any of the other volunteer teams, but not just anybody can do our job. Our job is primarily a professional volunteer status. And it's because of that that we did a lot of search and reconnaissance on the people that are members of our teams, and that kind of involved into the process of creating the standard. The primary purpose of our standard was that we wanted to make sure that the athletes had a safe environment that they were also comfortable in. Not just Band-Aids and Tylenol on the back, but that they could rely on us. And one of the frequent things that you'll hear in my athlete briefings is that our care doesn't stop at the finish line, so they can reach out to us. And over the years, we've been involved quite heavily in EAPs, which are emergency activation plans, which have extended beyond 4 and 5 pages to now, for Wodapalooza, the one that are right here, is adapted at 36 pages. And then if you include the appendices, I don't know which one.
I think it's appendix.
Yeah. One gets removed, one gets looked at.
Yeah, and if you include those, we end up with like 48 pages, so it's pretty extensive. And the reason that we do that is so that we have, again, that standard, and that standard travels multiple events across the globe. But that's the preliminary design, kind of what we do.
Love it. So, and the reason we're doing this today is because a lot of people, you get people saying, like you said, about a professional sport. We want a professional sport. But then you have those people that are like, I want a professional sport, but don't tell me what to do. And there's got to be a line in the sand there where you say, okay, we got to have rules. We gotta, do things. We don't want it to be, just an overarching, nemesis. We want to work with you and make this good for everybody. So, with these defined roles, we want to talk, a little bit about the governance of sport and how you make a sport that literally started on a ranch into something that fills arenas and beaches and has a ecosphere that promotes people to be able to go out and do what they love and actually get paid for it and make money. So let's talk a little bit about, you know, kind of how that works, building the PFAA and building that into a sport that is up and coming and growing.
Yeah, I suppose it's, I mean, how much time do we have? But, you know, I think kind of what we're doing here, right, making sure that, I think some people might think that the PFAA is, you know, like, yes, we're advocates for safety, but we're certainly not safety experts. That's not our responsibility in the context of, you know, if you're back there with the athletes, they have to warm up, they have to get ready to go, and there's sort of an assumption that things are safe, or as safe as they can be. And then I think creating those relationships between athletes and between the safety organizers, so, you know, pre-event or post-event, people that have that experience, those lines of communication can be really strong. So if there's something we're experiencing, maybe they're not familiar with. So as far as like organized sport or professional sport, it'd be good to have Gretchen up here as well from the IF3. That would be a good addition. But it's sort of those separations of power, right? It's having someone who understands judging, and then there's understands judges, understands the athletes, someone who understands event ownership and so on. And those circles are going to overlap, right? And so even with the AFJ, you know, just this weekend, we've been talking about more like as an elite athlete, what do we need from those judges to succeed on the floor without obviously anything that's against the rules, but making sure they understand why there are those rules. So I think sometimes, you know, I'll admit, like, we worked with Wodapalooza this weekend to have a rule around how to drop the barbell, which was for safety so that it wasn't bouncing around, but making sure that judges understand why that rule is there. And then I think some of the no reps maybe wouldn't have been called if they understood why that rule's there. Does that make sense? So as far as, I mean, I realize I'm bouncing around here. I'm aware of that. So, organized sport, it's a lot of work, it's a lot of communication, it's kind of like networking and figuring out, like, what does an event like Wodapalooza need to succeed, what are the non-negotiables for them to make that happen, and then having, you know, kind of allowing them to give more, get more feedback, whether it's from athletes, whether it's from, you know, the judges, and having, you know, just organized procedures where those things become more plug and play. And I talk to people about, if you were let's say all of us said, hey, let's organize a ping pong tournament, right? We would try to create a great event for the people that were coming, maybe the fans, if there were fans, and then the, you know, vendors, for example. And I think this huge fourth element in this sport that you don't have to deal with in ping pong is, what is the sport? And every time in our sport, we're trying to redefine it. And I think that takes up a lot of time behind the scenes to not only get, you know, the lights set up and the stage and sell the tickets and the timing, and then you're reinventing the sport every time. I think there's a lot of opportunity there to create some best practices, create some standards, create procedures that can streamline that process while still having like cool workouts, new stuff. Like, I don't want to get rid of that, right? But I think you can create procedures there and have different groups in control of different things, spread out that responsibility a little bit, and there's more collaboration. And then you can start, there's more time then to think bigger. Like, what's the next step? How do we connect all these amazing competitions around the world into like a cohesive, essentially a season, and something where everyone kind of has their place, and there's all these, you know, through lines and connections between them, whether that's, you know, athletes qualifying to other events, whether it's sharing judges, sharing best practices, sharing media, telling more stories. I think to me, like, those are all things that come into a proper organized sport.
And that's been one of the big things with, you know, with an event like this, is you see all the moving parts, and there's not one person. There can't be one person that does it all. and you've got to have each person with their role and that's passionate about each of those roles. So you have to have somebody that's passionate about bringing the vendors in, and you have somebody that's passionate about bringing the fans in, somebody that's passionate about making sure that the athletes are out there doing workouts that are going to be entertaining. So I love that cohesiveness. So let's jump to the judging. So now that we've built a competition and we've built with athletes coming on the floor. I've been at events where I've judged, where I've been a volunteer, where they're like, hey, here's a free pair of shoes, go out there and stand for 12 hours. And I've joked with athletes at local events. I'm like, I swear I'm going to be more sore and tired than you are at the end of the day, because you're only out here for 15 minutes. I'm out here for 12 hours. So talk a little bit about that side of it, because I don't think a lot of times you get the keyboard warriors that come on, on Instagram, or they come on YouTube and they're like, oh, look at this rep that they did, and that judge should have known better. Like, talk a little bit about that and how you professionalize a volunteer group and turn them into something that can actually be an association.
Yeah, so one of the big things is standard operating procedures, standardizing the systems as much as possible, because every competition is their own independent ecosystem. So everyone's going to have their own way to do things, their own standards they want to use. And I suppose from the athlete's perspective as well as the judges, if we go to a competition and say, hey, we're changing this standard, yet we've spent the last 10 years doing it a certain way, and then it changes overnight, they're going to have a problem, we're going to have a problem, no one's going to know what that standard is. And that's when you get these keyboard warriors saying, oh, they didn't do this. And we're like, but that wasn't the standard, but that also wasn't publicized to the general population. It was told to the judges, it was told to the athletes, and no more. So having a standard movement book, what we're helping with the PFA to create, with all different safety concerns, variations, standardized communications between the judge and the athlete. So when the athlete, after a 20-minute workout, they're looking at us with sweat pouring off of them, and we give them a hand signal, know exactly what that is and what they need to do. There's a very distinct cue we can give them for a reason why we gave them a no rep. I think a lot of athletes would probably like to know, like, well, who is judging them? Like, are they competent? Like, are they just a volunteer who's getting a pair of shoes and a free shaker bottle at the end of this? Or, like, have they been doing this for years and years? Are they taking that extra time to build their knowledge base, to get time in a lane and hone their craft? And that's where we're really fighting for now.
And with an event like this, with elite all the way down to literally, children. I mean, there's a 13-year-old, age group. How do you qualify that? Like, is it something where you earn your way into, okay, let's start here. Let's start you on this stage, and if we can see a pattern of good, good judging, we move you up into like an elite phase. Like, are there stages of judging that you go through?
They're not as well defined as what we would like them to be. So a big competition like Wodapalooza, it's a numbers game. They're trying to get as many people in to judge as they can. There are some of those people who just want to get on the competition floor next to a big athlete, get their free swag and hightail out of here. So it's getting people in, getting them on lower stages. If they do need to be on sort of elite athletes, putting them on day one, event one, seeing how they respond to the crowd, the noise, barbells being dropped, media surrounding you, things like that, and then almost a trial by fire. And then you sink or swim, you swim, great, next bit, we can keep pushing you, and then how you respond to that feedback as well, having that head judge say, hey, make sure you're watching to this extension, or position yourself here so you're going to be able to see this better. So right now there isn't really a standardization for that. That's what we're working on with our in-person seminar, and then this evaluation period, and then having essentially levels for judges, very much kind of like how CrossFit has their level 1, level 2, level 3. We want to create that same standardization, so the bigger competitions where there is a lot of prize money, the athletes know that the person who's going to be in my lane judging me in the finals when I've got a lot of money in the line is the best person for it, and it's not just, well, we've got to make sure we're bringing in new people because there's a high turnover and this person's maybe only judged the last 2 days. I think from that perspective, we need to make sure that the right judges are in the right position to make those difficult calls.
Gotcha. And, from that whole point, we build the competition, and then we come to Josh and it's like, hey, are we safe? So there's so much that goes into that. And you talked about, the pages just getting added and added and added because different movements, different standards, different conditions. Literally, we've seen the 4 seasons since we've been here. How does all that play into a competition, especially, like here, we're outdoors. Literally, it's almost fair game. So how do you hone in on that?
So one of the things that I bring up the most about an EAP is that it is a living document and it's never the same. So we take the core of that document and we build on it every year, and it's going to be varied from event to event, but not its base structure. So that base structure is a standard, and standards are born out of necessity. Some standards are born out of an extreme necessity, and some standards aren't. But the standard stands, and that's why we continue to build on it. The EAPs here, I think the first one that I wrote was 15, 16 pages, but we started adding in specific sections, and I've added a few things in the past couple of years, such as an EAP quick reference. It's a PDF file people can keep on their phone. In order to read the entire EAP, you're either going to have to be a nerd like me, a safety nerd, and want to go through all this stuff, or have the patience to sit down, or like most of the rest of the population, have it explained to you. So I wanted to create small documents that were bite-sized pieces that had specific information that could disseminate those things down. And those safety standards go through to also judges, which we've incorporated heavily and now has become basically an industry standard in terms of a massive injury on the field or, God forbid, a catastrophic incident, medical incident, where we use the staff that's out there that may not be medical staff to create a physical barrier while we do what we do. And that physical barrier, cell phones and technology are great until they're not. And that creates an entire level of difficulty, not for us from a exposure standpoint, but for the family. They're seeing something happen to a loved one or, somebody out on the field, and we want to preserve that. So the EAP has those things built into it. And I think to add on to your question about that particular EAP building, every year at the end of every event, we do what's called an after-action report. And we'll take items and we'll build into it. Sometimes those items will add things that we think are going to work and they look great on paper. And then you get out into the field and try to implement them, and it's either manpower or just the obstruction process of it, they don't work. One of the things that helps me do this is the sheer amount of events that I could do. Just over saturation, I'm allowed to try a lot of different things. And one of the primary things is inside versus outside events. This event has helped me to build all of the major structures that we use across the globe, just because of the free reign that I have to test things. And when I say test, I don't mean like the athletes are a guinea pig. I mean, we try those before anybody takes the field to play. And I think that's an entirely different conversation about drilling and our process for that to create confidence. Because on a medical side of things, our team is all professionals. We don't allow people on that just think wearing a red shirt's cool. I do a serious process of vetting the members of my team so they have some type of medical licensure. It could be an EMT, paramedic, flight medic, nurse, all the way to orthopedic surgeons and doctors. And that was a wink to the orthopedic surgeon everybody knows. He's here as well. And having that vetting process helps us to carry the selection process for these teams. again, across the globe for other events. And I have that resource available for anybody, even if they're not using me, that people will email me, hey, can you check this person? Do they have experience? If they write that down. And that's not to keep people honest, that's to show people experience a level. You know, you guys were talking about doing the level 1, level 2, level 3 judging. We can't really do that. You know, you can't have a level 1 paramedic, level 2 paramedic, although some of us think that we can do that. That's not the way that works. So we want to know the experience level. We want to have people that have exposure and build a leadership structure to the med team, and that structure follows through in everything. The confidence allows us to operate under stress, and then to go to the back and have good quality nursing staff and physicians in the back for the treatment. It just continues that trust, and that trust goes to the athletes, you know, the people that are there. We want them to know that we have their best interest in mind, and we want them to know that how they're going to be treated in Scotland at Rogue is the same as they'll be treated here, is the same as the games, is the same as, you know, whatever small event. We want to build that into that, and trust goes down to the team as well. I've always been big on, I've always called it training my replacement, because you never know what happens. Life is big, and I've worked very hard over the years to develop these teams that I run and the operations that they're in. So it would be a travesty to me for something to happen to me and me not be here and that to fall apart. So I wouldn't so much call it anymore training my replacement, as, you know, anybody can say they're a leader, but if you've not got any followers or any people behind you, you're really just taking a walk. So I want to make sure that I have a team of leaders, which is what we try to disseminate to these other events.
Well, and having a team that knows you so well that they know how you're going to react to something, so that they can make a decision based on that if you're not right there. You know, or God forbid it's something where you're dealing with an issue over here and something happens over here, that you have a team that you can trust to make those decisions. One of the things that I always, like, I've done 5Ks and events and parties and I've done things where, you know, I'm on the mic and I'm emceeing and I'm like, these are the paramedics and we hope they are the most boring people here. Like, that they don't have to do anything at all. If everything goes perfectly, they've just had a relaxing weekend just hanging out in the sun. So that's the goal. So with you guys all working together, you know, obviously we're building something that we're hoping carries on into the future, far from this. So what is kind of the outlook going forward, and how are you guys building that to be a success long past this?
You know, as I was listening to Hicks, there were a bunch of things that he was saying where, you know, we've already started this process, is how do we get some experienced athletes and coaches to be involved in some of those processes, and the athletes that are interested, they can, you know, read through and understand the emergency action plan. That's going to be very few, but more so thinking, okay, like, what are the experiences that athletes have had that can maybe even improve what their team is doing? And a lot with an emergency action plan, that's after the fact, that's after something happened, but prevention, you know, hopefully allows for things to not happen. So what is the minimum effective amount of matting for a pull-up bar or for a rope climb, or what is the distance you need between a barbell and a rower and a plyo box, and sort of like standardizing those things so that it's not proprietary where, you know, Wodapalooza has their standard and maybe the CrossFit Games has theirs, and then you go to a local competition and everything's really, really close together, and they say, well, this is just the amount of space we have, as opposed to hopefully athletes or, you know, those events understanding like you can change these workouts. They're all made up, so there's really no excuse. Like, maybe this workout just doesn't have rowing because we don't have the space. So I think that's kind of where I see it going, is having, you know, really like more open source information, because in most other sports, those things exist, right? You can, if you want to run a competition for another sport, you can find that information on how to best set up. I mean, you know, in the case of a hockey rink, the hockey rink's just there, right? And as long as the Zamboni driver keeps the ice in good condition, everything else just sort of runs itself, right? But the setup of the floor, you know, the time from your last lift to taking the competition floor to start your 1 rep max, like, that time needs to be short. And, you know, you've seen this now across the games, which is great, and even at Wodapalooza, like we call it the satellite warm-up area, where you warm up, then you get marshaled, you're brought to the lifting area, and they have a barbell there so you can get a few more lifts before you hit the floor. And that's going to increase the likelihood of athletes having a safe lifting experience, and also lifting more, which is going to make them happy, it's going to make the fans happy. So turning that into something it's just known now, it's taken a few years, but now Wodapalooza just does that. The CrossFit Games, they just do that, which is great. How do we make that common practice at maybe an event that's brand new in South America or in Europe, right? And so thinking to that, and that's something that's known, and some people know it, some events don't know it. How do we get more events to know it? And then how do we think about the next step? And especially the steps that cost little to no money, right? Like that's the sweet spot. Like how can we distribute that information? And I think some of that can be done via the athletes, right? If the athletes care about that, they have some of the largest voice, especially when combined together. And so if obviously their safety is important to them, and if myself and the PFA can do a good job of explaining to them, hey, this is where we see things needing to go, they're going to support that, and then we can kind of amplify that necessity. More events will get on board, and then you start to have better communication, and you start to have a better future where hopefully less athletes are getting hurt, right? And I think that's very possible, even if it maybe is not measurable. It's a good thing.
So one of the things unique about actually each division you guys are representing is that Brent, you're representing professional athletes in that scope, and you're representing the medical community, but you have kind of a volunteer where I don't want to say it's open access, because it's not just anybody can do it, but at the same time, anybody who is passionate about the sport and passionate about wanting to further the sport could potentially walk into a position with you guys. So how does that factor in as far as I know you're doing the trainings and things like that, but if somebody was interested and wanted to say, hey, I've thought about judging before, and I think it would be something that I would be passionate about and want to do. I'm in my box, training, and I want to kind of go to the next step and help this process. What is something that they can, kind of latch onto and do?
I think it works the same for athletes as well. Like, go to a competition and judge. We have a saying that, how do you get 2,000 hours of experience? 2,000 hours. There are no shortcuts. You need to volunteer at local competitions. There are plenty of bigger competitions that always need volunteers. Get out there, get in the lane, actually see what happens. Because as you said earlier, it's very easy for keyboard warriors to just sit there and watch YouTube videos and complain. But the second you actually get in the lane and you see what's happening, it is vastly different. So get in the lane, get your eyes focused on what judging actually is, get some experience, and just keep taking that next step. Like I said, we're trying to push for more professional judging, getting the sport to that better location, but we need that volume, we need that background of people wanting to push through to the next part.
Awesome. And with events like this, I mean, it's polarizing. You get that out there on the main stage, and for the athletes as well, but the judges, and the athletes are the focus, because everybody wants to come. That's who they're showing up to watch in the lanes. They're not showing up to watch the judges. At least normal people. there are a few that are there just like, I'm gonna watch it. But it is such a polarizing event. So getting them acclimated to this kind of scenario, what are some of the processes that you go through in that training to kind of help with this?
Yeah, I must say, like Kevin, the head judge Wodapalooza, I've worked with him for a very long time. He is an amazing judge. He makes an amazing event for the judges. It's taking that experience of those seasoned judges and putting them into a position to help the next guys coming in. With our seminar, we spend a lot of time on the procedures at the competition. You can see the athletes, the judges now all moving down the lane at the same time, all orientating to the same location. At the end of the day, we should be invisible. We sort of say we are spotlight adjacent. The athletes are the focus. We should just be out of frame. If we're in frame, something's gone terribly, terribly wrong.
Or the athlete went terribly, terribly wrong. One of the two. Because, I mean, there is that responsibility, too. You know, sometimes you guys do get hate when you shouldn't, at times. You know, and you know, sometimes the athletes, you know, just have to keep going and keep doing it. So, you know, so Brent, with just stepping off the competition floor, does it change anything for you as far as how you look at things, or have you always just kind of had that same look? Or now that you can step outside of an event that you've been, you know, a competitor in for so long, can you now take a step outside and look at it from a different view?
Yeah, I think so. It's been really, I mean, I'm really grateful for the partnership that we have with Wodapalooza, which has grown from last year, and, you know, for myself and for Grace to have sort of access to, you know, I've been trying to lend a hand and try to see some small things where I know if I was an athlete, I would really want that fixed. And so, you know, making sure that satellite lifting platform was exactly how it needed to be. We need to do a better job today as soon as we're done here, making sure that the beach stage is being raked in between heats, so we're not getting the waves from the sled. And yeah, I think hopefully having the experience that I have, I've always been someone who's been pretty high attention to detail, and there's certainly things like I don't know. Like, I don't know what it's like to be a judge out there. I don't know, I've never run an event of this size, but I've competed at these events, and I know what I liked and what I didn't like, and it's been interesting to see, you know, the decisions that lead to that, or the communications that led to that. And some things are unavoidable, whether it's like we just don't have the equipment, we just simply do not have the barbells to maybe set the floor up differently. I mean, it's amazing at the CrossFit Games when you have 10 lanes and there's 10 barbells a lane. There's 100 barbells. Like, that'd be great for maybe the final event last night if you had 6 barbells, right? But without that, there's transitions. And so I think, like, seeing some of that, it really lights a fire for me on a personal level to see if I can give back, to see if I can lend some of my experience. And I feel like we've helped, at least Dylan's told me that so far the PFA has helped in the lead up to the competition in here this weekend to really give a perspective from, you know, the athletes. And then hopefully, and this was something Hicks mentioned, like the trust component. So you can have someone in the warm-up area or just sort of near the athletes that's very much there for their experience, that the athletes can trust. And I'm not saying that has to be me. I've filled that role a little bit this weekend, where they feel like they can come to me if there's a problem or if they see something that could be a problem. And, you know, I understand why they're saying that. As soon as they say it, I'm like, yeah, the rings need to be the same in the warm-up area as out here. I'm going to make sure that's the case. I'm going to go measure the rings. I'm going to run back and make sure they're 96 inches back there for you, because those little details really matter. And over time, I can think of athletes that have had bad experiences at competitions that were no fault of the competition necessarily, but they lost interest in competing because of that. And you can't have that happen over and over again for too many years and expect to just keep getting new people. And I think that's kind of the key piece, is like, we're talking about growth, we also need to have you know, the same people that are coming back for 10, 20 years, and then when they leave, they're excited to bring someone else and start coaching them. But if people get burnt out and frustrated by their experiences with competitions, no matter how much money you put into signage or anything else, like, if you don't have the athletes coming back, if you don't have the judges coming back, you're gonna have a really tough time, like, continuing to fill those shoes. So I think my experience as an athlete, I'm hoping to, it's really exciting for me to, you know, take a step back, hopefully out of the spotlight, other than the occasional interview like this, and see if there's something that I can do behind the scenes, you know, through the PFA or through something else, to really make sure, like, that athlete experience is really on point. And then the story isn't like the mistakes that were made, or, you know, some piece of equipment failing, or a weird transition, or a judging error. The story is just the athletes. It's all about, like, that race last night between Lucy Campbell and Laura Horvath. Like, that should be the biggest headline, was that, and not, you know, drama or malfunctions. And I think there's, like, a series of really small steps with people like this, hopefully, that can lead us towards a place where that's most of the discussion, and that's what people in the stands continue to be excited about, and everything else just sort of blends into the background. All those little decisions you don't even really know they're happening, but then athletes can leave and you say, hey, how was your experience? You're like, you know what, that was pretty good. And their memories are what happened on the floor, and it's not a frustration regarding like, the warm-up area, or you know, like this, and you know, we weren't communicated with on time, or the judges were frustrated, they were put in a difficult position to judge something that maybe was a bad standard, or maybe they were put in a difficult situation with a movement they weren't comfortable with that was brand new. So trying to remove all those little things, and hopefully, like, I've really enjoyed it. People have asked me, do you have any FOMO? And I'm like, not at all. Like, if I thought I was going to miss it, I wouldn't have stopped. Yeah. And so I'm really like excited, and this has fired me up to help this event be a little better next year, and just see what else I can do as an athlete, and then, you know, to help those athletes backstage, for them to understand like the weight that their voice carries, and as a cohesive unit that we can drive forward like an immense amount of change, hopefully in the next, you know, year or two. So.
And that's one of the things I did hear you say when you were talking about, I've never been on the floor judging. I'm like, throw them out there. See, if you want to really, you know, figure it out and, you know, understand everything. You know, it's clearly research, you know, to get you out there judging. I would love to see the look on someone's face when you line up in front of them to judge them.
I'd hate to be, I mean, speaking of spotlight, that could be a problem. But I actually I like that idea. Maybe with a team event or something. I don't want to get in the way, but yeah, it would be interesting to see from that perspective, and I think that would be really valuable. I mean, there were I can't remember his name. There was an NBA announcer that refereed a preseason game to see what it was like, and Richard Jefferson. I got
okay,
it.
yeah.
So you know, Cleveland Cavalier. He's now a broadcaster, and you know, to help him better understand the game, you know, he was a judge, right? And I think it's important to have people making decisions that have been athletes, people, not just athletes, people making decisions that obviously know how to run events, but then making sure we have people, you know, whether it's Ed or whether it's Kevin, like leading teams that really understand those things. And, you know, those circles of control we talked about earlier, you know, as many times, I might take the floor a few times as a judge, I'm never going to have that same understanding that he does, and that's okay, right?
Yeah, so one of the great things about our working relationship, we just had our first in-person seminar, and the PFA were very helpful in providing some elite games for athletes. So we had Khan Porter, we had Alex Kazan at our seminar as our demo athletes. So we had these new judges getting a chance to watch athletes have a very high caliber moving at speed, and that's the thing that people tend to miss from their affiliate. There is a big difference between judging Tom, your best mate in the Open, to judging here at the games. There is a big difference in capacity there. And the feedback we got from Khan and Alex was, wow, it's great to know what the judges are looking for and what they're seeing, and it's great for us to hear from the athletes, well, I'm trying to do this to do this. So that's why I'm trying to do this particular movement a certain way.
Can you give an example?
So yeah, one of them we went through was the different standards with handstand push-ups. So typically people would go kipping handstand push-ups, strict handstand push-ups, then wall facing, because that's the difficulty of the movement. From a judging perspective, it's the other way around. We want the strict wall-facing handstand push-up is the most binary of them, and as the movement increases in speed, we have to look for more and more things. So like having Khan kick up to that wall and do a few reps and say, well, this is what we're looking for, and he's like, oh yeah, I was totally not locking out my elbows there. Like, why? How did you see that? Well, because when you kicked up, you showed me that fully locked out position. So you're showing me what your end rep looks like. And if it doesn't look like that, even if you don't think if you think you are extending those elbows all the way and you think you're doing a good rep, we're looking for that extra step that shows what the starting position looked like.
A lot like standing up in a squat. It's like you're not standing up hunched over. Like when you're just standing regularly, you stand all the way up. I would love to see you do a reps ahead and then see the look on somebody's face when you just step in front of them to judge them. You speak. Be great. Actually, I was say you could judge a teen event. I think the teens would be floored.
I'd hate to be a distraction for the teenagers. Maybe like an RX team or something like that. That's a little.
Would love it.
And maybe Masters. That's not a bad idea. Maybe we'll look into that here. That's not a bad idea.
Yeah. And it's one of those things that, you know, I always tell my athletes when I'm coaching them, when they're looking at standards and things like that, they're like, don't look for loopholes. Don't leave it up to the judges. Like, literally do not leave it up to the judges. Not that you're doing anything wrong, but don't make it so close that they have to make a call. The goal is the judges not have to make a call because the athlete is moving well. So, and you know, same with you. We don't want to use you, but when you have to be rolled out, you know, you're there.
You know, you said you tell people not to look for loopholes in the movement standards, and I think on the converse side of that, when they find the loopholes, they also find us waiting because there is a reason that loophole hasn't been specifically outlawed. So,
and that's your job, is to look at the safety loophole to make sure that, you know, hey, okay, yeah, on the movement side we could think that everything's fine, but then you get to go look at it and say, no, this isn't going to work because we see the end outcome of what's going to happen. So, you know, we're in Miami. What have you seen here that has just been like, has there anything that has exceeded your expectations here, you know, from any of you as far as, you know, what we have going on with this event, or is there a specific moment that stood out that is just like, man, that's gold star right there?
I'll go, I guess. I think, I mean, it's always refreshing to get out of the internet and to get to a live event and see still how much passion there is. And, you know, even like the LATAM Cup, getting to go right next to the elite individuals for the first day, for the first workout of the weekend on Thursday. I really enjoyed watching that and felt like there was like a palpable energy from those athletes to take the floor with, you know, Pat Vellner or James Sprague, probably some of their idols. And I think that's what's always great about Wodapalooza is just the variety of athletes you're getting here from all over the world, certainly all over North America, all different skill levels, you know, watching the adaptive athletes in the wheelchairs, you know, the masters, the teams, even like coming down here on a plane, there were, from Toronto, there were a bunch of people on that plane all going to Wodapalooza from Canada, which was always like really cool to feel like it's descending to the beach. I really like the new venue. Getting used to a little more sand into the shoes is going to be, you know, mental note for next year, maybe how to better prepare for that for myself. But I think it's been nice having like more space and just like, yeah, a little more room to breathe than Bayfront Park for all of us has been nice. And you know, it's been what's been exciting for me is like seeing the passion behind the scenes, because I mean, you know, as an athlete, a lot of those people behind the scenes that have been doing that as long as I've been competing, you know, you don't get to meet those people, you don't get to know them, you don't get to see their passion that's as high as mine is for my side of the thing, and that's been really cool for me to get to know those people. And yeah, I think I'm excited to, you know, to help them solve maybe a few things that they've already identified from this new venue, and hopefully, you know, improve on that for SoCal, improve on that for Miami next year. And then I think this is maybe the biggest, in some ways the most chaotic event in the world because it's on the sand, and so, you know, if you can make this work, you can probably make any event work. I think that's what's been fun for me, is just seeing it all come together.
The same thing going here, Chris Lane, 15 just won.
Yeah, no, Wodapalooza is always an amazing experience, and this new location is even better. Like Brent said, now having it on the beach, a fantastic view. They've got to really expand the whole venue, has been fantastic. The judging community really is a very tight-knit family. You're going to see the same judges at every competition. So it's really nice to see everyone again, beginning of the year, be excited for the next year. One thing they've done really well this year is, I mean, all the judges are volunteers. So today, there is a lot of them who are in at 6 a.m. and they're not going to be leaving here till 8 p.m. And if you're on the floor the entire time, that can be incredibly exhausting under the heat. Different movement standards, changing the different teams or individuals, scale, elite, RX. And I've definitely seen a lot and heard a lot of good feedback that judges have had to have some rest, being able to get off the competition floor, get back to the hotel, get some food, enjoy the vendor village, enjoy the experience of being here, get a couple of hours off, reset that brain so they can get back on the competition floor and do what they hear and what they're passionate about.
I think Wodapalooza comes with its own unique safety challenges just given weather alone. And I do love this new venue, but I think one of the things that every year I come to Wodapalooza, it impresses me more and more are the teams of volunteers. Not just judging, but, and I've got to toot my own team's horn, the amount of people that come in and ask questions and are ready to go from a serious standpoint, you know, hey, I follow you on Instagram, I've seen a couple of those drills, can you kind of explain this? Are we going to get to do this? Can you walk me through this? I want to take this to my local competition. And I think that on a grassroots level, that's where we're wanting the sport to go, and I think that it's moving in the right direction. And that's just what I've been most excited to see this year. We have a ton of new people on my med team specifically. I know you guys do as well, but you know, when I started this, I had 10 spots still open on the med team. And you fast forward from 2018 until now, and I've got a 72-person wait list to get on the medical team. And I know other teams are like that. And this year we did have another unique experience. Weather-based was the flights. We had a ton of different cancellations and things that nobody could help. So we had to adapt and overcome. You know, unknown and unknowable, right? So that's just kind of where it comes, and it permeates every aspect of the sport. So
I feel like getting to know Brent, unknown and unknowable is probably his most hated term. I always see like an eye roll. It's like, oh.
No,
but
I think there's times when it's used advantageously. When it, you know, I love. I mean, some of my favorite workouts are the weird ones, right? Yeah. And I've had success with some of the weirdest workouts, so I can't complain about that. But I think sometimes it's used in a way that might be convenient for whoever is using it. Whether, you know, it's talking about weather, it's like, I don't know. It's just it's more a going joke that I have with a few people that.
But you're also someone synonymously known for being like prepared and planned, and like everything is like.
But I think what's great about our sport is like I don't want us doing burpees and bubble wrap, right? Like that's not my goal, and I don't want it to be boring where you're showing up and it's like a 1R max back squat, a 5K run, and Cindy, and that's all you ever get to do. It's not that at all, right? It's just, you know, a little bit of like consistency within the chaos, I suppose, is important for me. And I think it's easy to use like these maybe broad terms about like what you want, and then when you're an athlete and you know you lose $20,000 because of a bad movement standard, it tends to stick in your mind, or it happens to another friend, or there's an equipment malfunction, or a really strange format that doesn't actually reward the fittest person. It's just like there's a huge element of luck that tends to like leave a little imprint in the brain. So it's little things like that I love. You know, I think that's what makes our sport's a racing sport, right? So most sports that are the most popular sports are always going to be offense, defense sports, right? Like football, basketball, badminton, whatever, where you're, you know, the unknown element is more so what the opponent's going to do and your quick reaction time to that. Those are always going to be the most popular sports. And then after that, there's races, right? So it's, you know, the 100-meter dash, it's Olympic weightlifting, and it's more you against the scoreboard relative to the other scoreboard. And we fall into that, but we have this exciting kind of other element, which is that the race is constantly changing. And that, you know, provides for a lot more entertainment and a lot more excitement. You're not just running a 5K for 10, 20 years. You know, I think all of us here love that unknown element, and I do too.
I think going into what Brent was saying about our sport as a race, if you take something like Formula One, you have Monaco, you have Silverstone, Circuit of the Americas, all amazing different races in the Formula One calendar, but they all follow the same standardized procedure procedures. The unknown is the circuit, the weather, everything else. And I think that's kind of what we're all trying to push towards is we want that excitement of the weather, the venue, the movements, how does the competition look, but we want a standardization to make sure that everyone is playing from the same starting point.
Well, we're running out of time, so I want to, if anybody wants more information, let them know where they can find more information on each of your organizations.
Yeah, we have a website, an Instagram, the PFA. Yeah, pretty easy to find.
Yeah, Instagram, YouTube, associationoffitnessjudges.org on our website.
Hicks?
I'm working on that. We had some kind of a hiccup on that, but you can get a hold of me through the PFAA. So.
Very good. All right, well, gentlemen, thank you guys so much for being here, and thanks for all that you do for the sport and for, not even the sport, but the volunteers, the athletes, the medical. Thank you guys so much. Awesome.
You've been listening to the Wex Appeal Podcast. Get connected by heading to Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok at Wex Appeal Podcast for more bonus buffoonery and to get the full Wex experience. Plus, make sure to subscribe on your podcast app today. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time for more barbells, beats, and buffoonery.